At 21, she crossed a line with her best friend's millionaire father and fell into forbidden love. Sometimes the moment that changes your life isn't loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or grand announcements. Sometimes it's just a glance, one look across a crowded room, and suddenly everything shifts. It was the night of her graduation from Columbia Law. The Grand Astoria ballroom buzzed with celebration. Champagne flutes clinked, orchestras played, and proud parents filled the air with toasts and laughter. Among the crowd stood Madeline Hart, 21 years old, dressed in deep emerald satin, her blonde curls pinned loosely. Her heart still catching up with the reality of becoming a lawyer. She had made it through long nights of study, impossible exams, and years of sacrifice. Tonight was supposed to be a clean break into adulthood until she looked up. Across the ballroom, standing near the open bar, was a man who made time slow, Daniel Grant. Her best friend, Ava's father. A man she had known since she was 18 but never really seen. Not like this. He was tall, sharply dressed in a charcoal gray suit that hugged his athletic frame, silver at his temples, drink in hand, surveying the room with quiet authority. Daniel wasn't just someone's dad. He was a commanding presence, the kind of man who didn't need to say much to be heard, the kind of man who owned silence. And then he looked at her. 1 second, that's all it took. His eyes, steely gray, unreadable, found hers through the crowd, and something unspoken passed between them. A recognition, a flash of heat, confusion, and inevitability. Madeline felt her pulse jump, her breath caught. She turned away quickly, laughing too loudly at something Ava had just said. But her hands trembled as she adjusted her bracelet, and no matter how hard she tried not to, she felt him watching. That one look burned into her skin. She reminded herself, he's your best friend's father. He's off limits. But the seed had already been planted. Later that night, as she stood in a circle of classmates taking photos, Madeline dared another glance in Daniel's direction. He was still there, calm, alone, drink barely touched. And when their eyes met again, it was no accident. There was no smile, no wink, just a steady, smoldering silence. And yet, it said everything. The next moment, someone was calling her name from the stage, her diploma. She walked up the spotlight hot on her shoulders, applause echoing around her. But her focus wasn't on the dean's handshake or the flash of cameras. Her eyes scanned the room until they found him again. Still watching, still unreadable, still dangerous. In that instant, Madeline knew something had started. A story that would never be innocent. A connection that should never have happened. She didn't know if it would be love disaster or something in between. But deep in her chest, something whispered, "This night isn't over. Not for you, not for him." And she was right, because the most forbidden stories always start in silence. It was supposed to be just a break. 2 weeks on the coast, no work, no stress, just sun, sea, and celebration. Ava Grant, bubbly and relentless as ever, had planned it the day after graduation. "We have to go to my dad's place in Malibu," she said, twirling her phone between her fingers. "You've earned it, Maddie. It's time to exhale." Madeline hesitated. She wasn't ready, not because of finals or fatigue, but because of him. Daniel, Ava's father, the man who had stared through her soul at the gala. She hadn't spoken to him that night, not one word. But ever since she returned to her tiny apartment in Manhattan, her mind had been haunted by his gaze. Calm, unreadable, aware. Every time she blinked, she saw it. Every time her phone buzzed, her stomach twisted. Still, she smiled and nodded. "Sure," she said lightly. "Let's go to Malibu." The drive down the Pacific Coast Highway felt like a dream. Cliffs falling into restless waves, palm trees bending under salty winds. Ava was at the wheel, singing to the radio, barefoot and carefree. Madeleine in the passenger seat stared out at the ocean, trying to breathe. The closer they got, the more she felt it, the storm building inside her chest. The beach house was perched above the water glass and cedar, all clean lines and serenity. The kind of place you'd expect to find in a magazine, not real life. And then he was there. Daniel stood on the deck barefoot, wearing a white button-down, half rolled at the sleeves and khaki shorts. Casual, but impossibly put together. He looked up as the car pulled in. Ava jumped out and ran into his arms, laughing. Madeline followed slowly, trying not to stare. "Madeline," he said, nodding as she approached. "Glad you could join us." "Thanks for having me," she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands, not so much. Their eyes met briefly, just a second longer than polite. Enough for her to feel it, that same heat from the gala. Controlled, restrained, but undeniable. Ava, oblivious as always, tugged Madeline's arm. "Come on, you have to see the view from your room." The next hour was a whirlwind of unpacking laughter and sunset photos on the beach. Ava talked about grad school travel plans, everything that made Madeline feel young and untethered, but beneath it all, a current pulled at her. Every time Daniel entered the room, she felt her body tighten. Every time his voice cut through the air, her breath caught. That night they had dinner on the patio, grilled shrimp avocado salad, cold wine candles flickering in the wind. Ava filled the silence with stories. Daniel listened quietly. Madeline sat across from him, pretending to eat. She couldn't focus, not with the way his eyes slid to her during pauses, not with the way her skin burned under the weight of his gaze, not with how the ocean crashed behind them like a warning drum. Later, Ava excused herself early. "I'm wiped. I'm crashing," she yawned. "You two stay up. Talk law or something boring." Madeline laughed politely. Daniel began clearing plates. She stood to help. A simple act. But when their fingers touched over a glass, she flinched. Not from fear, but electricity. He didn't move. Neither did she. The silence between them was louder than any thunder. And then, like nothing happened, he stepped back. "Good night, Madeline." She nodded, lips parted, heart pounding. "Good night, Daniel." She went upstairs with legs that didn't feel like hers. That night, lying in the massive guest bed, staring at the ceiling, she didn't think about Ava or school or Malibu. She thought about him. She thought about the way his voice said her name. And she knew, whatever storm had started in New York, it was about to break wide open on this coast. The next morning in Malibu felt unreal, like waking up inside a dream. You weren't sure you wanted to leave. The early sun spilled through white linen curtains, and the scent of ocean salt mixed with fresh coffee drifted through the house. Madeline stepped lightly down the wooden glass staircase barefoot, wrapped in a soft gray sweater over her tank top. Her hair was loose, still damp from her shower. In the kitchen, Daniel stood alone. He was pouring coffee dressed in dark jeans and a fitted navy t-shirt. He looked rested, calm. But when he looked up and saw her, really saw her, something shifted, not in his posture, not in his expression, but in the air between them. "Good morning," he said, voice low, almost hesitant. Madeline nodded, trying to sound casual. "Morning." She walked to the counter and reached for a mug. He handed one to her. Their fingers brushed, barely. But it was enough. A current shot up her arm, a spark so sharp she nearly dropped the cup. Daniel steadied it without taking his eyes off her. The silence that followed was thick, not awkward, not accidental, but heavy with what neither of them wanted to name. She cleared her throat and pulled away. Ava burst in moments later, all sunshine and loud energy breaking the spell. She tossed a slice of bread into the toaster and dropped into a stool, chatting about taking the paddle boards out before lunch. Madeline nodded, forcing a smile. But she wasn't there. She was still at the counter, still feeling the heat of Daniel's hand on hers, still trying to breathe. The day went by in pieces, sunlight on skin ocean breeze and hair fake laughter over beach games. But Madeline's mind never left that kitchen. She barely looked at Daniel, but she felt him. Every step he took across the deck, every glance she tried not to return. That night after Ava had gone to bed early again, Madeline stayed behind to rinse the dishes. Daniel was already in the kitchen stacking the plates. She reached for the large serving platter at the same time he did. Their hands touched again, but this time neither of them moved away. Madeline froze. His hand was warm, large, still. Her own hand trembled slightly beneath it. She looked up, and he was already looking at her. This close she could see the tired lines at the corners of his eyes, the silver flecks in his stubble, the conflict carved into every inch of his face. And yet, there was something else there. Something raw. Something that had nothing to do with age or rules or reason. A want, her breath caught. The air was too quiet. The waves outside crashed faintly in the distance, but inside the house, time stopped. Daniel finally pulled away. Slow, controlled, careful. like touching her had cost him something. "I'll finish up," he said, his voice quiet, restrained. Madeline nodded, too afraid to speak. Her heart was slamming in her chest, her skin alive in ways she didn't understand. She climbed the stairs in silence, entered her room, and shut the door behind her with unnecessary force. She leaned against it and eyes closed, trying to calm the storm inside her. This is nothing, she told herself. Just adrenaline, just exhaustion, just lies. She pressed her hand to her chest, because she knew the truth. She felt it in her bones. This wasn't some passing infatuation or a foolish misunderstanding. This wasn't about age or taboo or guilt. This was desire, deep, unshakable, wrong. And worse, she wasn't alone in feeling it. Downstairs, Daniel stood motionless at the sink, staring out at the dark horizon. Hands braced on the edge of the counter, jaw tight, breathing steady, but only just. He had felt it too. The spark, the danger, the door that had just opened and would never fully close again. The final morning in Malibu arrived cloaked in sunlight, the kind of perfect blue sky morning meant for postcards and happy memories. Ava was already packing up beach towels, humming to a playlist as she tossed things into the trunk. Madeline, meanwhile, stood on the upstairs balcony, gripping the railing as she watched the waves crash against the rocks. She hadn't slept much, not since the night before, when Daniel's hand had lingered over hers for just a second too long, when his eyes had whispered things his mouth never dared say. She was rattled, not because something had happened, but because something almost had. And in some ways, that was worse. 2 weeks in this house had unraveled her. What had started as stolen glances had evolved into a silent obsession. She had memorized the way Daniel held his coffee mug in the morning, the subtle roll of his sleeves when he was lost in thought, the way his voice dipped an octave when he said her name. And he hadn't touched her. Not really, but her body remembered every accidental brush, every breath they had shared too close, every second of tension that hadn't broken. Yet, "Hey," Ava called up, "we're leaving in 10. Madeline nodded, pulling herself from the thoughts that wrapped around her like sea mist. Downstairs, Daniel was standing by the car loading the last bag. He didn't look at her when she approached, but his presence still thunderous. Ava gave her father a quick hug. "Thanks for letting us crash, Dad. You're the best." "Of course," he said. Then he turned to Madeline. She hesitated, unsure whether to speak, shake his hand, hug him, or run. "Thank you," she said softly. Daniel gave a small nod. "You're welcome anytime." That was it. That was all. But the weight of that sentence sat heavy between them. The drive back up the coast was long. Ava was chatting about post-grad internships and whether they should move in together in the fall. Madeline mumbled agreement in her mind somewhere else, trapped between what happened and what didn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him standing in the kitchen, staring out the window, fists clenched, fighting something they both refused to name. By the time they reached Los Angeles, the sky was streaked with orange and violet. The city looked familiar again, loud, congested concrete, nothing like the wild serenity of Malibu, and yet everything felt different. Madeline stared out the window, her fingers absently tracing patterns on her jeans. She wasn't sure what had changed, only that it had, because once you've been looked at like that, once you've looked back, something inside you refuses to return to normal. Ava parked outside Madeleine's apartment complex. Home sweet home. Madeline smiled weakly. "Thanks for the ride." "Hey," Ava said, suddenly serious. "You okay?" Madeline nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." "Vacation hangover?" Ava laughed back to her usual self. "We'll plan another one soon. Maybe Lake Tahoe next time." Madeline gave a small wave and climbed out, watching the car to disappear around the corner. She walked into her building, up the stairs, and into her apartment where everything was just as she had left it. But she wasn't. As she stood in the middle of her living room, duffel bag still slung over her shoulder, she realized something had started in Malibu that wasn't going to stay there. She thought of Daniel, of the unfinished moments between them, of all the words that never left their mouths, of all the wanting that had no name. And in the quiet of that dim apartment, with only the sound of distant traffic outside, Madeline whispered aloud what she hadn't let herself say. "I'm not done with him." She closed her eyes and let the truth settle. She had left the beach house behind, but the man, he was still with her, in her breath, in her skin, in her bones. And something told her, He wasn't done with her either. It had been just over 2 weeks since Madeline returned from Malibu, but she hadn't stopped thinking about him. Every quiet moment, every walk to the coffee shop, every late-night email session was haunted by memories of Daniel Grant. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, but persistent. Like a hum beneath the surface of her life she couldn't silence. She hadn't seen him, not even a message. And that was for the best, right? So, when Ava called one afternoon and casually dropped a bombshell, Madeline nearly dropped her phone. "So, guess who's joining the firm?" Ava said cheerily. "You," Madeline blinked. "What are you talking about? My dad asked me if you'd be interested in an associate position." "I mean, duh." Of course I told him yes. "You're brilliant. And we'd get to work together." Madeline's heart skipped. He wants to hire me." "Well, yeah. Didn't you apply like a month ago during finals week?" She had, back when she'd been sending resumes to every big law firm in New York and LA, desperate and exhausted, not expecting much. She hadn't even remembered that one. "He said your application made the shortlist on merit alone," Ava continued, "but he didn't realize it was you until after the review committee recommended you." "Wild, huh?" Madeline tried to speak, but her throat was dry. "Why now?" "Anyway," Ava went on, "he said, if you're interested, you should come in next Monday to meet the team. I'm starting next week too. It'll be fun." Fun. Madeline sat on the edge of her bed, phone still pressed to her ear, blood pounding. "Madeline, you still there?" "Yeah," she said faintly. "Just surprised. Don't overthink it. Just say yes. You'll kill it." After the call ended, Madeline stared at her phone for a long time. Her stomach twisted, not because of nerves, not even because of the job, but because this changed everything. She knew what it meant, working for Daniel, seeing him every day, sitting in the same meetings, feeling that tension stretch thinner and thinner until it snapped. And still, she said yes. She told herself it was just a job, just a stepping stone, just one of the biggest firms in LA offering her a golden opportunity. But deep down, she knew that wasn't all. Monday morning arrived. Madeline stood outside the towering glass building in Century City resume folder, clutched tight in her hands. The sun reflected off the windows like steel, sharp, unrelenting. Inside, the marble lobby was hushed and pristine. A receptionist greeted her by name and directed her to the 32nd floor. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, Ava was already waiting near the reception desk. "Look at you," Ava said, hugging her. "We're gonna be unstoppable." Madeline smiled weakly, heart pounding. Then she saw him. Daniel stood farther down the hall, deep in conversation with a senior partner. He wore a sleek navy suit tie, perfectly knotted posture, straight and composed. But the moment his eyes found hers, something flickered. Not surprise, not shock, recognition. A beat passed, just one. Then he turned back to the conversation. Ava led Madeline to the conference room for orientation, chatting the whole way. Madeline nodded along, but her mind wasn't listening. Because this was it, the start of something dangerous. Not just because of what had almost happened in Malibu, but because now they were no longer just two people sharing glances on a porch. They were mentor and employee, CEO and associate, boss and subordinate, and every glance from here on would come with a cost. Later that afternoon, as Madeline organized her new office space, a quiet knock came at her door. She turned and froze. Daniel stepped inside. "I just wanted to welcome you officially," he said. Her voice barely worked. "Thank you, Mr. Grant." His mouth twitched, just slightly. "Daniel?" Their eyes locked. Silence stretched. "I'll be across the hall," he said softly. "If you need anything." He didn't smile. He didn't need to, because between them, everything had just resumed. And this time it wouldn't end with distance. It would begin with proximity. 4 weeks. That's how long Madeline had been working at Grant and Leland LLP, and yet it felt like time had folded in on itself. Every day she walked through the glass doors of the 32nd floor, the game began. The pretending, the distance, the effort to remain unaffected. But she wasn't, and neither was he. Daniel Grant, her boss, Ava's father, had mastered the art of composure. He was never impolite, never obvious. But every now and then during a meeting, he'd ask her a question and hold her gaze a second too long, just enough to make her heart stumble, just enough to make her question if it was just her. They never touched, never lingered in hallways, never exchanged anything but what could be typed in an email or said in a meeting. But oh, the silence between them screamed. It was a tension wound so tight it buzzed. At first, Madeline thought it was one-sided, that she was projecting, confusing proximity with longing, until one night the illusion cracked. They were in the glass-walled strategy room, reviewing briefs for a major corporate fraud case. Everyone else had left. The city glittered outside like a million secrets. The air conditioning hummed softly. Madeline leaned over the table, pointing out a weakness in the opposition's argument. And then she felt it. The heat of his breath, the nearness of his body. Daniel was behind her, not touching her, not even close enough to break rules, but close enough that she could smell the cedar and citrus in his cologne. Close enough that her skin prickled. Her hand faltered on the paper. He leaned slightly forward. "That's a good catch," he said, voice low. Smart thinking. She turned to respond, and found herself inches from his face. For a moment, one electric suspended moment, they just looked at each other. Her chest rose and fell. His jaw was tight. His eyes flicked from her eyes to her mouth and back. Then he straightened. Too fast. The moment snapped. He gathered his file and walked to the door without another word. "Good night, Madeline," he said, still facing away. She barely whispered her reply. "Good night." That was when she knew. He felt it too. It wasn't just her, wasn't just infatuation or office nerves. It was real, terrifying, impossible. Over the next 2 weeks, the tension grew thicker. They danced around it, in meetings and shared elevators in the small kitchen where their fingers nearly brushed over a coffee pot. No one else seemed to notice, not even Ava. But Madeline lived every moment as if the floor beneath her was crumbling. She began to avoid him, taking the long way around to meetings, declining opportunities that would put them alone in a room. He noticed. Of course he did. And then came the final straw. A partner assigned them both to the same late-night prep session for an upcoming deposition. Ava was out visiting clients. Everyone else had gone home. The office was still and dark, lit only by city lights and computer screens. Madeline told herself it was just another work night. That was a lie. She sat at the end of the conference table, flipping through notes. Daniel stood at the far end, silent. Eventually he spoke. "You've been avoiding me." She looked up, caught off guard. "I haven't." "You have," he interrupted, calm but certain. "I understand why." Silence. Then softer. "But I need you to know, this isn't easy for me either." Madeline didn't answer, because anything she said would shatter what little distance they had left. She gathered her papers. "I should go," she said, her voice tight. Daniel's jaw clenched. "Of course." She reached the door, paused, looked back, and in that look, a single backward glance over her shoulder. She said everything she couldn't voice. "I feel it too. I can't keep doing this. Please, don't make me fall." Daniel didn't move, and neither did she. But the air between them, it caught fire. The office was a ghost town by 9 p.m., the kind of quiet that settled in bones. Outside, the Los Angeles skyline blinked with distant lights. Inside, every hallway, every closed door hummed with the weight of unfinished business and things left unsaid. Madeline sat in the smaller strategy room, her notes spread across the table like scattered thoughts. She was alone again. At least she had been, until Daniel walked in. He didn't knock. He didn't say anything. He just closed the door behind him, slow and deliberate. She didn't look up. She couldn't. Not after the way their last conversation ended. Not after the truth she had seen in his eyes and heard in his voice. But she felt him. The way you feel thunder before it hits. He walked toward her, silent as a confession. He stopped beside her chair, close enough that her skin began to buzz. Close enough that her breath caught without warning. She stood. That was a mistake. Because now they were face to face. No desk between them. No space left to pretend. Her voice came out small. "Daniel." "Don't," he said, barely above a whisper. Their eyes locked. Time folded in. She could hear his breath, tight, uneven, matching hers beat for beat. His hand hovered at his side, twitching like it was fighting itself. He stepped closer. So close she could see the flecks of green buried in the gray of his eyes. So close she could see the fear, the hunger, the control slipping. Madeline didn't move, because she didn't want to, because every moment of restraint, every look they didn't hold, every touch they avoided had brought them to this. The moment when pretending ended. He reached up, slowly as if giving her time to stop him, and cupped her face with one trembling hand. Her breath hitched, her eyes stung. Then he kissed her, and the world disappeared. It wasn't sweet, it wasn't delicate, it was desperate. A crash of everything they'd buried for weeks. Mouths hungry, hands unsure. Two people finally surrendering to the fire they had walked through silently for too long. Madeline's fingers clutched at his shirt, pulling him closer, needing him to anchor her as the ground gave out beneath her feet. Daniel groaned low in his throat, a sound that was pain and relief and everything. His hands tangled in her hair, his mouth moving against hers like he'd forgotten how to breathe without it. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Only this, the release, the chaos, the truth. When they finally pulled apart, both of them, breathless, the room was silent again. But different now. It wasn't waiting. It was after. Daniel leaned his forehead against hers, still holding her face. "I shouldn't have done that," he whispered. "But you did," she replied, her voice shaky but clear. He pulled back just far enough to look at her. There was something broken in his eyes, something scared, and something free. He stepped away, slowly, reluctantly. "You should go," he said, "before I do something even more reckless." Madeline nodded, but neither of them moved, because now the line wasn't ahead of them. It was behind them. Crossed, burned, gone. She gathered her notes with trembling hands and walked out of the room without another word. Her heels clicked down the marble hall, too loud, too final. But she felt his eyes on her back with every step. That kiss had changed everything. And they both knew it. No more pretending, no more almosts. There was only after now. And in the quiet wreckage of that kiss, they were no longer two people bound by rules. They were two hearts bound by something far more dangerous. Desire, guilt, and a love too forbidden to survive the light. But maybe, just maybe, is too strong to die in the dark. From the outside, nothing had changed. Madeline still arrived at the office by 8:15 sharp, her blazer crisp, her heels quiet against the marble floors. She still smiled politely at colleagues, still crushed deadlines, still answered emails with clean efficiency. But inside, everything had changed. Because now she and Daniel were lovers. Not in the way stories told it. Not with candlelit dinners or romantic weekend getaways. No. Their love lived in shadows. In the in-between moments. In glances that held fire but wore masks. The kiss had opened a floodgate, and for 3 months, they lived in its current. It started small. A brush of hands under the table during a client meeting. A whispered exchange by the copy machine that looked like nothing to anyone else. A long, frozen stare when they passed in the hallway, both pretending not to feel the ache that came with walking away. Then came the nights. Quiet, stolen, and always unplanned. Sometimes it was his office door locked, blinds drawn. Sometimes hers after midnight, the city asleep and their hearts awake. He'd call her name in the dark. She'd come without a word. It was urgent, beautiful, and terrifying. Because with every kiss they built a house on fault lines. Ava remained blissfully unaware. She often gushed about how focused her dad had been lately, how the firm had never run smoother. "He seems lighter," she'd say, sipping coffee across from Madeline. "Like something's shifted." Madeline would smile, tight, careful, silent. Daniel was shifting all right. So was she, but the love they were nursing was not light. It was heavy, intoxicating, fragile. Every day Madeline fought guilt. Not because she didn't love him. She did, in ways that scared her. But because Ava was her friend, her best friend. And what kind of person hides this from someone who trusts them so deeply? Daniel carried it too. She could see it in the way he avoided Ava in hallways. In the quiet sighs when they lay in each other's arms, tangled in sheets and fear. "We can't keep doing this," he said one night, brushing her hair from her face. "I'm her father. You're her world." Madeline's voice cracked. "Then why can't I stop?" He didn't answer. Because he couldn't either. But love is a strange thing. It thrives in impossible places. And the more they tried to resist it, the more it grew. Wild and defiant. There were close calls. A cleaning staff member once walked in on them, leaving the same storage room minutes apart. An intern noticed Daniel's jacket hanging on Madeline's chair one morning. But nothing ever stuck. Nothing ever exploded. Until the night Ava walked into Madeline's office unexpectedly. She was carrying 2 mugs of coffee and a playful smirk. I figured you needed a caffeine boost. Dad's riding you hard this week, huh? Madeline nearly dropped the pen in her hand. What? I mean on cases, legal stuff. You look exhausted. Madeline laughed too loudly. Yeah, long hours. Ava sat studying her. Hey, random question. Do you think my dad's seeing someone? Madeline froze. I don't know, she said, trying not to make eye contact. Ava sipped her coffee thinking, he's different. I don't know how to explain it. Less guarded, like he's breathing again. Madeline managed a weak smile. That's good, right? I guess Ava shrugged. As long as he's not doing something dumb. And just like that, the air thickened. Madeline stared down at her notes, her heart in her throat, because she wasn't sure what scared her more, being found out. They're having to choose. That night she sat in Daniel's office long after everyone had left the lights off the city outside, shimmering like a lie. He stood behind her, hands on her shoulders, silent. We can't keep hiding, she said. I know, but we can't tell her. I know. They stood there, pressed together in the dark. 3 months of hidden fire had left them scarred, breathless, and bound. And Madeline realized, maybe for the first time, that this wasn't just an affair. This was a war between love and loyalty. And no matter how it ended, someone would lose. Secrets always have a shelf life. And in Madeline's case, it was exactly 96 days. That's how long it took for Ava Grant, bright, observant, and more intuitive than she let on, to put the pieces together. It started small. A misplaced glance, an awkward silence. The way Madeline would flush whenever Daniel entered the room. For weeks, Ava brushed it off. Her father was intense. Madeline was under pressure. They were both professionals. Why would there be anything more? But little things whispered otherwise. One morning, Ava stepped into the firm's private lounge and caught a glimpse she wasn't meant to see. Madeline and Daniel in the hallway, not touching, but standing close. Too close. Close in that way, you only stand when you're trying to pretend the space between you doesn't ache. They didn't notice her, but Ava saw everything. She didn't say a word that day, not to them, not to anyone, but a seed had been planted, a terrible, twisting seed. 2 nights later, Ava dropped by Madeline's apartment unexpectedly with Thai food and a bottle of wine. Girls' night, she announced. No work talk, just us. Madeline tried to act normal, tried to laugh, eat, listen. But her chest was tight, her hands fidgety, and the guilt louder than Ava's Spotify playlist. Then came the moment. Ava set down her wine glass and asked softly, "Are you sleeping with my dad?" Silence fell like a bomb. Madeline's fork slipped from her hand and clattered onto the plate. "What?" "I'm not accusing Ava," said quickly, her voice steady but shaking. I need to know. I deserve to know." Madeline stared at her best friend, her roommate, her sister in everything but blood. She wanted to deny it, to lie, but her face had already answered. Ava blinked, looked away. How long? Madeline's voice broke. 3 months. Ava let out a shaky laugh. Not joyful. Wow. 3 months, and you said nothing. I was going to, Madeline whispered, but I was scared. I didn't want to lose you. You didn't want to lose me, Ava repeated, her tone flat. But you were willing to betray me behind my back. Madeline flinched. Tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't like that. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Don't, Ava said, holding up a hand. Don't say it just happened. That makes it worse. Silence. Madeline stood walking to the window, wiping her face. I love him. Ava looked up sharply. What? Madeline turned. I love your father, and I think he loves me too. Ava stared at her, not angry now, just hurt. Deep bruising hurt. The kind that doesn't explode but sinks. She stood gathering her things. I need space, she said quietly. Madeline nodded, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. I'm not saying I hate you, Ava added at the door, but I don't know how to forgive you. Not yet. And then she left. The next morning, Daniel found Madeline sitting in the break room, hollow-eyed and silent. She knows she said before he could ask. His expression didn't change, but the color drained slightly from his face. What did she say? Not much, just that she needs space. Daniel leaned against the counter, closing his eyes. I've ruined everything. No, Madeline whispered. We did. He opened his eyes and looked at her. Really looked at her. And what she saw wasn't power, wasn't dominance. It was pain, regret, and still love. "She'll come around," he said, not knowing if it was true. Madeline nodded, even though her heart didn't believe it. Because the thing about forbidden love is, it doesn't just hurt you, it hurts everyone around you. And the price? It was never theirs alone to pay. The gala was meant to be a celebration, a champagne-soaked evening hosted in a grand downtown hotel to honor Grant and Leland's most successful quarter in years. Clients flew in from out of state. The atrium was bathed in gold light string quartets played from the upper mezzanine, and everyone wore masks. Not the kind you hold on sticks, but the kind people wear every day. Madeline wore black, elegant, safe. Her dress hugged her in all the right places but didn't scream for attention. Still, when she walked through the doors, Daniel saw her instantly. And she saw him. He looked like every inch the CEO black suit, crisp white shirt, a tie that matched his steel gray eyes. But beneath the polish, Madeline could sense the same unspoken war burning inside him. Especially now, after Ava's silence. They hadn't spoken in 4 days. Not Daniel and Ava. Not Ava and Madeline. Not even Daniel and Madeline, outside of emails and obligatory updates. The guilt clung to her like perfume. She floated through conversations, smiled for partners toasted with interns. But her body, it kept scanning for his. Their first interaction came just before midnight. She was walking through a quiet hallway leading to the rooftop terrace when she heard his voice, low, steady, call her name. "Madeline." She turned slowly. Daniel was alone, his expression unreadable. "I need to talk to you." She folded her arms defensive. "Now here." "Yes." His voice trembled slightly. "Because if I don't do this now, I never will." She didn't speak. So he did. "I haven't slept in days. I haven't stopped thinking about what we've done. Not just to us, but to her. And I keep telling myself we were wrong, that we should have ended it, that we should have never started." A pause, a breath. "But then I think about you." Madeline's eyes stung. Daniel stepped forward. "I think about your laugh, your fire, the way you see people, really see them. I think about the way I feel when I'm with you. Not powerful, not needed, but alive." She swallowed hard. "And all I know is this. I don't want to live a life where I can't have you in it." He pulled something from his inside jacket pocket. It wasn't a ring. It was a key to his house. "I'm not proposing marriage," he said softly. "I'm proposing honesty. I'm asking for us. Not behind closed doors, not in shadows, but real. Right now." Madeline looked down at the key in his palm. So simple, so dangerous, so right. A tear slipped down her cheek. She stepped forward and placed her hand over his. "Yes," she whispered. "Not to the key, not to the house, to him, to them, to everything." Their kiss was not urgent this time. It was tender, true, a slow claiming of what had already been theirs for months. Only now, it didn't hide. They left quietly hand in hand, escaping the ballroom before the clock struck midnight. At his penthouse, the city lay silent beneath them. Daniel poured her a glass of wine with shaky fingers, but she didn't take it. Instead, she walked toward him and kissed him again. Slow, reverent, grounded in something deeper than desire. They undressed with care. They touched with intention. Every caress said, "I see you." Every sigh whispered, "You're mine." And every breath was a vow unspoken. When he entered her, it wasn't about lust. It was about coming home. Their bodies moved as if they had always known each other. No rush, no fear, just surrender. After wrapped in sheets and silence, Daniel held her close. His hand slid into hers. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," he whispered, "but I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." She closed her eyes. For the first time since that night at the gala, since that first look, she wasn't running. Not from love. Not from guilt. Not from him. And in the dark and the truth, she felt something new. Peace. The Sunday after the gala arrived with golden sunlight and cautious hope. Daniel stood at the edge of his back patio, overlooking the Los Angeles hills. The city spread before him like a tapestry of possibility and risk. Much like his life now, he held 2 mugs of coffee. His nerves were not from caffeine. Inside, Madeline sat cross-legged on the couch, her heart pounding beneath her white linen shirt. She had barely eaten, barely slept, because today wasn't about the 2 of them. Today was about Ava, and whether the thread holding all three of their lives together could withstand the truth. When the doorbell rang, Daniel glanced back, meeting Madeline's eyes for one fleeting second. He gave a nod, not reassurance but solidarity, then walked to let his daughter in. Ava stepped inside wearing sunglasses and tension. Her usual warmth was muted, her smile tight. "Thanks for coming," Daniel said gently. She shrugged. "You said it was important." He led her outside where Madeline already waited. She stood when Ava approached, wiping her palms nervously on her jeans. "Ava," she began, voice steady, despite the tremble in her spine. "Before we say anything else, I need to say, I'm sorry." Ava didn't speak. "I betrayed your trust. I should have told you the moment things began to change. But I didn't. Because I was afraid. And because I didn't want to lose you." Daniel stepped forward. "Neither of us did. What happened between us wasn't something we planned or looked for. It happened." Still silence. Madeline's throat tightened. "If you hate me, I understand." Ava took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. She looked between them, then let out a long, slow breath. "You know what hurts the most." They both waited. "That I knew." Madeline blinked. "I knew something was different. I saw it in the way you looked at each other, how the room changed when you were near. I saw it, and I ignored it." She sat down staring at the hills. "Because I didn't want it to be true." A long pause. Then, "But I also know my dad hasn't been this awake in years. And I've never seen anyone look at him the way you do. Madeline, not even my mom." Madeline covered her mouth, the emotion too much. "I'm not saying this is easy," Ava added, "or that I'm okay right now. But I don't want to lose either of you. So, if this is real, if you're both all in, I'll figure out how to be okay with it." Daniel swallowed hard. "It is real." Madeline stepped closer. "We are all in." Ava looked up at her. "Then I guess we're going to need a hell of a lot more wine and some very awkward family dinners." The three of them laughed, softly, warily, but with genuine warmth. Later that evening, as Madeline stood beside Daniel on the balcony, the city lights twinkling beneath them, he turned to her. "I was going to wait," he said, "but now feels right." He pulled something small from his pocket. Not a ring, a locket, inside a picture of her and Ava, side by side, smiling at graduation. "For your desk," he said, "for your life." Madeline felt tears threaten again, but this time they didn't fall from fear or guilt. They fell from gratitude. Because after everything, after the risks, the silence, the fire, love had survived. Not because it had been easy, but because it had been real. And real things, they endure. Some stories aren't born perfect. They don't arrive dressed in tidy endings or wrapped in neat approval. Some stories, the real ones, are messy. They challenge the rules. They blur the lines. They ask us to choose between comfort and courage, between what's right and what's real. Madeleine and Daniel's story wasn't supposed to happen. He was her best friend's father. She was young, ambitious, off-limits. Their worlds were meant to orbit each other, not collide. But sometimes the heart doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for the right moment. It just knows. And for months they tried to silence that knowing, with distance, with guilt, with fear. But love, true love, doesn't quiet down. It rises, until you either run from it or risk everything for it. In the end, they chose the risk. And in doing so, they found not just passion, but truth. Not just each other, but forgiveness. From themselves, from the people they loved, from a world that rarely makes room for complicated love. And maybe that's the most powerful kind of story there is. The one where love doesn't arrive with permission, but with persistence, where it endures not because it's perfect, but because it refuses to give up. So if you've ever loved in silence, felt something forbidden, or stood at the edge of a choice that scared you to your core, maybe this story was for you. Because in a world full of rules, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is follow the heart anyway. Thank you for watching. If this story touched something inside, you share it with someone who needs to believe in imperfect love. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that remind us just how deeply the heart can feel